In December of 1945, a farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman swung his mattock into the ground below a cliff called Jabal al-Tarif in Upper Egypt and hit something hollow, a sealed clay jar 60 centimeters tall. He was afraid to break it, not afraid of the police, afraid of the jinn that might be living inside. Gold beat fear. He smashed it open. Out fell 13 leather-bound books that the church had ordered destroyed 15 centuries earlier. His mother fed pages of them into the bread oven. The books that survived her sit in the Coptic Museum of Old Cairo right now, behind glass. The order was to destroy these books. Whoever held them last chose a jar built to keep them alive. Why would anyone bury a gospel instead of burning it? This is the story of the Nag Hammadi Library. 13 codices, 52 texts. And before this video ends, 4 things. 1. The receipts. Dated receipts glued inside the leather covers that let these books tell us their own age. 2. What these texts claim about who really rules this world. Their answer has a name. 3. The gospel that was buried twice. Once by sand for 1,600 years. Once by Berlin for 59 more. 4. The famous lost gospel that was never in this jar at all. Almost every big video on this topic gets that one wrong. If you want the history they didn't teach you, documented line by line, subscribe. Now, back to the jar. 7 men were standing under the cliff that day, according to the account the farmer gave years later. Most wanted no part of the find, old paper, possibly cursed. So Muhammad Ali carried all 13 books home to his village, Al-Qasr, and dropped the pile on the floor beside the oven. What happened in that house explains how close this came to never existing. His mother, a widow named Ahmad, needed kindling for the bread. She used pages. Most of Codex 12 went into the fire sheet by sheet. Books that had lasted 1,500 years under the sand were lost in weeks beside her oven. Not destroyed by an empire, almost destroyed by breakfast. And the family had a bigger problem than old books. The farmer's father had been murdered. The brothers took the blood revenge local custom demanded, and the police raids that followed made their house no place for strange books. One codex went to a Coptic priest for safekeeping, and the priest's brother-in-law carried it to Cairo, suspecting it was worth money. On October 4, 1946, that volume entered the Coptic Museum, bought by its director, Togo Mina. A year later, the French scholar Jean Dorès opened it and understood what had come out of the desert. The rest of the library scattered through the black market. One codex slipped out of Egypt entirely and ended up in Zurich as the Jung Codex. Egypt spent until 1975 getting the runaway pages back. Today, all 13 are together in Old Cairo. And Codex 13 is barely a book at all. 8 leaves that someone in antiquity slid inside the cover of Codex 6. A book hidden inside a book, hidden inside a jar, hidden inside a desert. But the strangest evidence in this collection was never written on its pages. It was glued inside the covers. Almost every ancient book has the same problem. Someone has to guess its age. The Nag Hammadi codices skip the guessing because their makers did something accidental and perfect. They padded the covers with scrap paper. 4th century bookbinders stiffened leather covers with cartonnage, layers of used papyrus glued together inside the cover. Old letters, contracts, receipts. When conservators took apart the binding of Codex 7, the scrap inside included documents with consular dates. The years they name are 341 346 and 348 of the Common Era, not an estimate. A binder working sometime after the year 348 reached for the workshop's waste paper and sealed the date of his own labor inside the cover. The books date themselves, which pins the burial to the late 4th century, and the late 4th century in this exact corner of Egypt is when the motive walks into the room. In the year 367, Athanasius of Alexandria, the most powerful bishop in Egypt, sent out his 39th festal letter, read to every church and monastery in the country. That letter contains the first list in recorded history of exactly the 27 books that form the New Testament today. Before 367, no surviving document draws that line. Athanasius drew it. Then he turned to everything outside the line. Those books, the letter says, are the invention of heretics, written to lead the simple astray, not a suggestion, a purge order. Now look at the map. A few kilometers from the cliff stood monasteries of the Pachomian order. The classic hypothesis. The letter of 367 arrives. The shelves are purged, and someone, a monk whose name no one will ever know, cannot bring himself to do it. He packs the condemned books into a jar, cements a bowl over the mouth, and carries it to the cliff. If that hypothesis is right, the jar was not disposal. It was disobedience. Burying is not burning. Burying is waiting. Which makes the next question unavoidable. What is in these books that a man might defy the most powerful bishop in Egypt to save them? Layer 1. The most famous book in the jar is the Gospel of Thomas, and it does not look like any gospel in the Bible. No birth, no miracles, no trial, no cross, no resurrection. Just a bare list of 114 numbered sayings attributed to Jesus, written in Sahidic Coptic, translated from a lost Greek original. The list opens with a single unsettling line. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. Secret sayings, not a public proclamation, a private transmission. Saying 3 is the one that built this gospel's reputation. If those who lead you say to you, "See, the kingdom is in the sky," then the birds of the sky will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Notice what is missing from those lines. No temple, no priest, no institution standing between the seeker and the thing sought. So a fair question forms, and it will matter later. What does a religious institution do with a text that makes the institution optional? Hold that thought. And here is the detail that proves nobody dreamed this book up in 1945. In an ancient rubbish dump at Oxyrhynchus, in Egypt, Oxford archaeologists had recovered 3 Greek papyrus fragments, catalogued as Papyrus Oxyrhynchus I, 654, and 655, dated between roughly 130 and 250 CE. Scholars could read every word. They could not name the book. For 48 years those scraps stayed orphans, until the jar surrendered the complete text and the match became obvious. They were the Gospel of Thomas in its original Greek. 2 burials, 2 deserts, 1 book. That is layer 1, the gentle layer. The next book in the jar is not gentle. According to the next book, this world has a ruler. It gives his 3 names, describes his face, and explains why he prefers not to be recognized. Layer 2. In the same volume, right before the Gospel of Thomas, sits the book the ancient underground could not stop copying, the Apocryphon of John, the secret book of John. It survives in 4 separate ancient copies, 3 from this jar, plus a 4th we will meet in a few minutes, which makes it the most duplicated Gnostic treatise that survives anywhere. The text claims to be a secret revelation given to John, the disciple, and the universe it reveals is upside down. According to the Apocryphon of John, the true God did not make this world. The true God is pure, unreachable light. The world, matter, bodies, time, all of it, was made by something lower, a flawed being, born in ignorance, cast away, that no one of the immortal ones might see it. The text describes the discarded creature, a form of a lion-faced serpent, and its eyes were like lightning fires which flash. Then the text does something ancient scriptures almost never do. It names him 3 times. The first name is Yaldabaoth, the second is Saklas, and the third is Samael. For he said, I am God, and there is no other God beside me. For he is ignorant of his strength, the place from which he had come. Sit with that line. I am God, and there is no other God beside me. In the Hebrew Bible, that declaration is the signature of the Creator himself. So what exactly is this text accusing? What if the echo is the entire point? Another treatise from the jar adds the verdict. A voice answers the blind chief from above. You are mistaken, Samael. A name the text itself translates as God of the blind. A blind God, convinced he is the only power that exists. And he does not govern alone. His officers carry the most loaded job title in Gnosticism, archons, rulers. They run the material world the way wardens run a prison. And the prisoner is a spark of the true light, trapped inside each human being. The Apocryphon calls the body the bond of forgetfulness. According to these books, the core human problem is not sin. It is amnesia. And salvation is not forgiveness. It is recovery of information. The Greek word is gnosis. So there is the answer promised in this video's title. Who really rules this world? According to the books from the jar, not the true God, but a blind impostor and his wardens. Read that way. The purge of 367 stops being a mystery. A church teaching that creation is good meets a library claiming the maker is a blind jailer. One of the two had to disappear. But the strangest chapter of this story is one almost nobody tells. The world did not actually need the jar to read the secret book of John. A copy reached Berlin in 1896, and the modern world buried it all over again. Layer 3. In 1896, 49 years before the mattock rang against the jar, a German scholar bought an ancient codex in Cairo. It traveled to Berlin as Papyrus Berlinensis 8502. Inside it, the Apocryphon of John, complete, legible, sitting in one of the best-funded research capitals on Earth. Then the 20th century happened to it. An edition finally went to press in 1912. The print run was destroyed before publication. Then the First World War. Then the years that wrecked Germany. Then the Second World War. The Berlin Codex was finally published in 1955, edited by Walter Till. Purchased in 1896. Published in 1955. 59 years. The desert buried the secret book of John for 1,600 years. Berlin buried it for 59 more. And the second burial needed no bishop. Just a destroyed print run, 2 world wars, and the quiet entropy of institutions. Sometimes the world simply loses its grip, and the pattern runs through the whole library. Around the year 180, the church father Irenaeus condemned a gospel of truth circulating among heretics. For 17 centuries, that title survived only in its enemy's report, until the jar opened, and there it was. Even after 1945, the waiting continued. The complete library in English arrived only in 1977. One more correction, because this channel promised no fake quotes. The Gospel of Judas, the famous National Geographic publication of 2006, was never in this jar. It comes from a different manuscript, the Codex Chacos, found elsewhere. Nearly every viral video folds it into Nag Hammadi. It does not belong there. So far, this has been a story about other people: farmers, bishops, scholars, widows. But the texts in the jar were never written about them. They were written at whoever is reading. And that is where this stops being archaeology. In 1979, the historian Elaine Pagels published The Gnostic Gospels, and the jar went mainstream on the back of one sharp question: what do these texts say to the person holding them? So let the texts do what they were built to do. Let them aim at you. According to the Gospel of Thomas, saying 3, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. Inside of you, not above you, not waiting behind a gate after death. And saying 113 sharpens it. The kingdom is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it. Already here, around you right now, visible to anyone, seen by almost no one. The failure is not in the kingdom. The failure is in the seeing. Then there is saying 70, which may be the most demanding sentence in the whole library. That which you have will save you if you bring it forth from yourselves. That which you do not have within you will kill you if you do not have it within you. Read it twice and notice. There is no one else in that sentence. No mediator, no rescue arriving from outside. What saves you is already yours. And so is what kills you. Now take the Gnostic claim and run it, just as a question, against an ordinary Tuesday. What if the bond of forgetfulness reads less like ancient myth and more like a diagnosis? The alarm, the commute, the feed, the noise. A life arranged so that you never sit still long enough to remember what you are? The texts call the rulers archons. What if a ruler does not need a throne? What if all it needs is your attention? You do not have to believe any of it. But notice what just happened. A voice from 1600 years ago reached out of a broken jar and asked you whether you are awake. But every word of this depends on a story we have been taking on faith. The farmer, the jar, the monk, the midnight burial. And in 2013, a scholar pulled a thread, and the story began to unravel. Time to be honest about what the skeptics say, because some of what they say is right. Start with the texts. The mainstream scholarly position dates these works to the 2nd century and later, written generations after the events they describe, then translated into Coptic. These are not suppressed eyewitness records. They are voices from a later war over what Christianity was going to become. That case is solid, and this channel will not pretend otherwise. Then there is the discovery story. The jinn, the gold, the oven. It is almost too good. And in 2013, the New Testament scholar Mark Goodacre published a paper with a blunt title: How Reliable is the Story of the Nag Hammadi Discovery? Goodacre lined up the published versions and found that James M. Robinson's own retellings disagree with each other. In a 1977 version, 2 people are present at the find. In 1979, 7. By 1981, 8. Remember the 7 men under the cliff at the start of this video? That number depends on which year Robinson was asked. 1 year later came the deeper challenge. In 2014, the scholars Nicola Denzi Lewis and Justine Ariel Blount published Rethinking the Origins of the Nag Hammadi Codices. Their proposal deletes the monk entirely. The codices, they argue, may be grave goods, books buried with their wealthy owners. A practice well attested in Egypt. No midnight walk to the cliff. No act of holy disobedience. Just private readers who wanted their books with them in death. If they are right, the most moving scene in this video, the believer who chose the jar over the fire dissolves. What the evidence actually fixes. The cartonnage dates the bindings after 348. The letter of 367 is real. The monasteries really stood nearby. Everything connecting those dots is inference. Strong inference, still inference. But notice what survives every version of the skeptical case. Monk or mourner, library or tomb. Someone placed these books in a jar and cemented a bowl over its mouth. In the dry sand of Upper Egypt, a sealed jar is not a discard pile. It is a vault. Whoever closed that lid chose the one container that gives a book a chance at forever. Grave or hiding place, the gesture reads the same. Burying is not burning. Burying is a message addressed to a future the sender would never see. Hold the two images side by side. An oven in Alcazar, 1945. A widow feeding pages of Codex 12 into the fire because paper is paper and bread is bread. A jar below a cliff sometime after 348. A pair of hands sealing 13 books into clay. The fire unmade a codex in weeks. The jar carried 52 texts across 16 centuries. The letter of 367 worked almost perfectly. For 1,578 years, the books outside the list were simply gone. Not argued against, not refuted, absent. Generations read a Christianity with the other voices removed and no way of knowing. Now anyone can check. Maybe the Gospel of Thomas explains the jar better than any journal article ever will, saying too, "Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled." Whoever sealed that jar had read those words and sealed them in anyway. He was not protecting the books from trouble. He was keeping the trouble safe. The jar was a bet that, past the bishops and the ovens and the wars, a reader would eventually come. In December of 1945, the bet paid out. The books sit behind glass in old Cairo. The argument they carry was never put back in the jar. And the shelf is not empty. The Bible describes a solid dome over the earth. In the text itself, holding back an ocean above the sky. And a Babylonian map, scratched into clay in the British Museum, shows what its makers believed lies beyond that edge. That story is next.